Let me start a live stream. Oops. Okay, we will not have live stream today since I do not have permission. But otherwise, we are good to go.
So we don't have live stream, meaning that people can't. We're recording, but people can't come in, huh?
They cannot see it on YouTube real time, but the class will be posted afterwards.
Okay, but if they tried to come in, they would know how to come in here. All right, no problem. Yeah. That's fine. Okay, we're good to go then. All right, please join palms. Bow. The four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Welcome to you all. We're going to continue on with the Manjusri's discourse on the Paramita of Wisdom. And this again comes from the Maha Ratna Kutta compilation of sutras. And there's a lot of compilations of wisdom sutras, all the way from, you could say, the Sutrette, which is a little heart sutra, of 30 lines to 300 lines to 1,000 lines, all the way up to 100,000 lines. And a lot of the material is similar. It is presenting very, very profound wisdom. And this wisdom is very important because this type of wisdom enables one to practice with Buddha mind perception. Without understanding this kind of wisdom, one practices as if they're a sentient being. And there's a big difference, the difference between life and death. So it's something that, as some of you are beginning to realize this, your practice has become incredible. I mean, there's some of you have really gone very quickly through this and have penetrated through to the esoteric, which is good. I don't want to say to people, oh, that's the goal. But the goal is to study sincerely. The people that have made great progress, by and large, they've studied a lot and practiced a lot. It's not something that comes to you where you go, I want one. It isn't that way. It is something that is you have to really want it. I remember a while back I was talking to someone that I was mentoring as an attorney, and I've done that very often in my career. And I mentioned to her at that time how much money I was making, and she said, "Oh, I want to do that. I want to make that money." And I go, "No." And she said, "No, I want to make." I said, "No, you don't." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Because you have to be willing to put in the effort to make money. You have to do the things that you have, to take care of the clients, to make sure that you are doing all the work that you need and doing the work at a very high level and really hustle and have a lot of clients and be able to manage those clients. But you haven't shown me that you can do that. You don't want the responsibility, so you won't have that money." And the same thing is with the Dharma. If you're willing to practice hard, it will come to you. Same thing in Kung Fu. In Kung Fu or Qigong, they always had a thing saying, "Are you willing to eat bitter? Are you willing to do the things that the master's telling you to do?" That is almost like it'll make or break you to change your body. And that is what you're doing when you're studying the Dharma. What you're doing is you're studying it in a way in which you really want to penetrate it, that there's nothing more important than to get this, and your mind will not stray. It is possible to enter into a deep samadhi when reading the Dharma simply because it's impossible to penetrate the Dharma or understand it if your mind is strained. If you're reading, you're going, I'm hungry. If you're reading, I'm sleepy. Oh, I'm confused. Any eyes coming up are going to take you off of that single-minded purpose. So it's this single-minded purpose that is very important. At this moment, your single-minded purpose is to listen to the Dharma. Listen with your heart, and you are prepared. You're calm, quiet. Nothing more matters. You've invested this time to to uh, to listen to this Dharma. You cannot half listen to it and then half watch Dancing with the Stars on the TV. It's not that way. You're going to end up dancing with the Buddhas, but it isn't in that way. So let's use our sincerity to practice hard. It does pay off, and I'm very, very uh, enthused by the fact that so many of you now are making significant penetrations, very significant penetrations to the Buddha Dharma. I want to back up one moment, and I don't know if you have it, Will, or not. The page 104. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So in this page 104, where um, uh, we're at, the Buddha asked, Manjusri, have you attained unobstructed wisdom? So unobstructed wisdom is what I'm talking about when you're studying, is there's no obstructions. You were reading, there's no obstructions in you understanding. Your mind is there. And if your mind is unobstructed, you will penetrate through, not just through the metaphysical prajna paramita, deep wisdom, but through to the esoteric. It will happen in that way because there's nothing to stop it. It's as if they're all of the obstructions that were there, they just go away. Once they go away, mind is there. Mind has always been there. We were just looking through it through a smudge looking glass, so we couldn't see anything. But once all of that goes away, it's unobstructed. So Manjusri answered, I, I am the unobstructed. And so in this way, it's very important because what he's saying, and there's a refrain that goes through these um, prajna paramita wisdoms in terms of this, and looking at this and seeing that there's no duality. So one cannot attain the Buddha vehicle. How could Manjusri obtain the Buddha vehicle? So he's saying, I am the unobstructed. Now, if we walk around and say that to people, because some people won't understand that, they will probably talk about you and say you think you're higher level than you are, or that you're this or you're that, or how can you do that? Only the Buddha can do this, or a high level person can do that. What's funny about when Master Ling Chi says that, and the sutras, that this very mind that you're using is the Buddha mind. It's consistent. You're not studying to become something you already are. You're studying to realize there's nothing to study because there is no obstructions there. Those appearances as obstructions, you let them go via wisdom and applied wisdom. And as you do that, it helps. So I wanted to touch on that because there's a similar refrain that comes up in the chapter 2. So we can go to chapter 2 now, please. Then Sariputra said to the Buddha, so now Sariputra is coming back up again. World honored one, the Paramita of Wisdom spoken by Manjusri is beyond the comprehension of novice bodhisattvas. So, he's saying, this is kind of hard for bodhisattvas, and perhaps he's putting himself in that category as a novice bodhisattva. And what he's really saying is, I don't understand what Manjusri is talking about. And so this is beyond the comprehension of this. Manjusri said it is incomprehensible not only to the novice bodhisattvas, but to the Shravakas, the Pratika Buddhas, who have already done what they set out to do, which is to reach nirvana. No one can comprehend teaching like this. And this is the important part when you look at this, and it says, no one, so not anybody, can comprehend teaching like this. This is pregnant with very much of importance, because it's talking about there is no person that would get this. They cannot understand it. Sometimes I used to say this, but I stopped doing it because people misunderstood what I was saying, where somebody might say, I don't understand. And I would tell them, you will never understand. But unfortunately, that level of teaching was beyond that person. So I stopped doing that because people took offense to it and said, well, I'm never going to understand this. So why should I even practice? Gilbert said, I'll never understand it. But it is what is being said here by Manjusri. Why? Because there is really nothing knowledgeable about the Bodhi, which defies seeing, learning, attaining, thinking, arising, ceasing, speaking, and hearing, thus being empty and quiescent by nature now, and characteristic, beyond realization and comprehension. So here it's saying, as you begin to practice, you may even get realizations, but these realizations, if they're based on a samsaric understanding, it will not help you. So if we understand, let's say, ekayana, that everything is the Buddha mind, there's just where even the one returns to that. We understand that, and we understand that from a position of the metaphysical deep prajna, prajna, excuse me, but we haven't penetrated it. And so Manjusri is saying that this is not something that you can just lay out and say it's this and this and this and this. Again, I always am talking about the platform because that helps you understand what is all of this writing. All this writing is presenting this platform for you. And from there, then you being mind has to move forward. So it says, devoid of shape and form, how can Bodhi be acquired by anyone? Sariputra asked Manjusri, does a Buddha not realize supreme enlightenment through Dharma Dhatu? So what do you think? He's saying, and you're going to be reading ahead of me, but that's okay. He's saying to him, does the Buddha, again, not, isn't it true that the Buddha, I'm going to change the language a little bit, realizes supreme enlightenment through the Dharma Dhatu? So again, here we're coming, and Manjusri says, no, Sariputra. Why? And I love this kind of a presentation that they're giving here where he's saying no and then why? Because it's spoon feeding this Dharma to you. It's really, really spoon feeding. If you see it saying blah, 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 and then it tells you why. Because the world honored one is the Dharma Dhatu itself, of course. when you begin to understand this, when you begin to see this, there's a great joy. All of a sudden you see, of course, there's no obstructions. How could there be obstructions? I'm the unobstructed. What is that? Mind, not Gilbert, not anybody else. Just mind is in this way. How could the Buddha realize supreme enlightenment? They're presupposing because the Buddha appeared um, in a Nirmanakaya form, an appearance body, that the Buddha is flesh and blood. But we know from the Diamond Sutra, he cannot be known by his 32 marks. Causes and conditions. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. You seem to have lost your video.
I did? Oh, I don't know what happened here. No problem. You can interrupt me. I don't know how long that is. Anytime when something goes off, then let me know. Can you see me now? No?
No.
Hold on. This virtual background is still loading. I don't know why I didn't press any virtual background.
Oh, you're back.
I'm back. Okay. So I have to try to stay away from my keyboard because I had the notes on the keyboard, so I might have pressed something. So I'm sorry, but thank you for telling me that. Okay. So we continue this, and it says why? Because in the Dharma there's no trace of sentient beings, and all dharmas are empty. And again, this is why it's really important that we understand the Trikaya of the Sambhogakaya, the reward body, the mind ground, the Dharmakaya, and the Nirmanakaya, which is the appearance body. And so to understand this, for those of you who have some kind of a Christian background, you could say that Jesus was the appearance body for God. And kind of interesting. Theologically, it goes on from there into different ways. But the burning bush in the Old Testament, which this burning bush was talking, I think Moses, and was an appearance body. And so this is something that we see in this way, but is not. It has the Buddha element, but in and of itself is not separate from the Buddha element. Okay. The emptiness of all dharmas is bodhi. So this emptiness, now they're going back to this because let's go all the way back to the Heart Sutra. And it says the emptiness of all dharmas is, the emptiness of all dharmas is bodhi, meaning that this is the realization. This is when one recognizes that there is nothing separate. It's all dependent origination, appearances within mind, whether it's the Buddha that's appearing, or you that is appearing, or your problems that are appearing, your birth or your death. All of these things are empty. They're not separate from mind because they're fundamentally empty. And when we look at this, it changes it. You have to turn that corner to let go of all of your conceptions and postulations as to what you think mind is, and all of this polishing of the self, letting it go. When you do that, the mind just rushes in. How could it not? There's no obstructions in it. Sariputra, where there is no discrimination, there is no knower. Where there is no knower, there is no speech. That which is beyond speech is neither existent nor non-existent. So let's stop there because we're already into very deep territory again. This is good stuff. And we read this in other sutras, and here it comes again about existence and non-existence. And so it's saying that when things are beyond speech, it's neither existent nor non-existent. If when he's saying beyond speech, it's beyond the conception. My mind, I think, I had a thought, you had a thought. It is your problem, my problem, whatever. When we stop that, we stop this notion of thinking, this conceptualization that there is somebody that, oh, I know, and so it isn't in this way. So we have to start there because then it makes sense when we say existent. It's neither existent nor non-existent. And again, this is what I mentioned to you before. It is the extinguishment of existence and non-existence. They are not two. They're not even one. It is just the thusness of that. That because if we try to say everything around us is a phantasm and a dream, but we're using our samsaric logic to say that, it doesn't make sense. If you try to explain this to somebody else, it doesn't make sense to them because they knock on the table and say, this table is real. I can't pass my hand through it. And so it's difficult to say that when we're looking at it and we're saying, oh, this is a dream. It's a dream, but it is neither real nor not real. It is just the thusness of mind, the operation of mind. And one who appears in mind can awaken to that and awaken to the function of mind. And it is this function of mind that's important because that's what the Heart Sutra is all about. What is the function of mind? Compassion. It's compassion. This we don't understand, and this was not fleshed out initially in the presentation of the Paramita Sutras. It necessitated the expansion through the Tathagata Garbha Sutras to correctly view this and see this is the true nature or the Buddha nature. And this true nature or Buddha nature is not an individual Buddha. It can include billions of Buddhas. It can include billions times billions times billions of sentient beings. But the true nature is not a thing, and that's important. It's not a concept. When we let go of trying to define it in words, trying to teach it, this is the danger, and this is why I'm very careful when I talk to you. And those who have been with me for many years know this, that I'm telling you this, but say, I have nothing to teach. No, so some of you from the very first times you met me will remember that hearing that from me, I have nothing to teach you. It is in this way that we understand. All I do is bring you up to higher up onto the platform and then suggest that you jump into the void. What's in the void? Everything and nothing. Huh? It's the existence and non-existence, existing and not existing side by side. And you go, that doesn't even make any sense. On the samsaric side, it doesn't. But in mind, it does. It's perfect. It clicks. And one of my students a couple of days ago was talking to me and saying, these things are like falling into place. And it is that way. There's times when the puzzle pieces will just keep coming together. And you will be working on one and then another one will do that. By the way, it doesn't matter whether we get through the sutra or not, because to expound on 1, 2, 3 lines of the sutras is enough. So all we're doing is learning, although I'm not teaching you, how to practice properly. Okay, so we got to the part of existent or non-existent, neither knowledgeable nor unknowledgeable. Um, so so it is with the dharmas. Why? Because no dharmas can be identified whether by location or specific nature. So if you say you exist, and then you say, okay, well, I exist. Let's say I'm talking to Will, and Will says he exists. And I say, really, where do you exist? Would you say, Diamond Bar or wherever you live? Is that where you live? Is that where you are? And where is that? You're just on this third stone from the sun. And how many suns are there? And in what time frame is that all in there as well? But we see the things in front of our eyes and we take them to be real. We don't understand. We're not talking about um, little things like even the size of the galaxy. We're talking about galaxies upon galaxies upon galaxies, the institution of galaxies, the explosion of galaxies, the implosion of galaxies. Who knows how many times that's happened? And it would still pale in the infinite of the mind. But here we are on this tiny planet and in our room, and we are postulating about mind. It's okay, but we understand that it's neither known or unknown. We have to get used to that. As I started before from the very beginning, we talk about that this is the Buddha language. We have to understand this Buddha language. Then the world honored one asked Manjusri, you call me the Tathagata. Do you really think that I'm the Tathagata? Do you really think that I'm the Tathagata? You have to feel it. Don't go on to the next line and read it. You take a crack at trying to to penetrate it before you read the next part. Okay. Manjusri answered, no, world honored one, I do not think you are the Tathagata. There is nothing about suchness that distinguishes it as suchness. It is signless. It has no marks. That's why they were saying you can't know the Buddha by the 32 marks. It's signless. Everything about the Dharma Dhatu is signless. It doesn't have form. Yet it doesn't interfere with the appearances within the Dharma Dhatu of this. It just understands that those things are fundamentally empty. They're not real. They're empty. Then there's a difference. Nor is the Tathagata's wisdom capable of knowing suchness. So he's saying, even the Buddha's wisdom is incapable of knowing suchness. Because if we say that the Buddha knows suchness, then there's a duality there, and there's a gap between you and between the Buddha and the sentient beings, because the sentient beings don't know suchness, but does the Buddha know suchness? No, it doesn't work that way, because there is not this knower there in this way. I constantly are talking about the Ru, the Ru Zi and the Ru Jing, and this knowing aspect of mind. But this is mind. If there is something that calls himself or herself a Buddha, it could not know mind. How? And they say, why? Because the Tathagata and wisdom are not two. Wow. This is exciting stuff. This is really, really good, because they're not two. This is where Anyatara Samyak Sambodhi takes you to, and then says, bye. Because beyond that, the Buddha and the knowing are not two things. There's no duality there. Emptiness is the Tathagata. Therefore, the Tathagata is only an arbitrary name. Now, you've heard me before talk about this, and I say the Tathagata only exists in samsara. Is that blasphemy? Am I saying, well, you're saying that the Buddha is not real? No, the Tathagata is neither real nor unreal, but the appearance body only appears in the samsaric form. But the Buddha, via the suchness and emptiness, is signless with no form, no name. That's why they're saying it's only an arbitrary name. So you're there and you're trying to cling to the Buddha, holding on to the Buddha, and hoping the Buddha will pull you through by these words. And Buddha's saying, you're grasping on to sea foam or seaweed to try to float you. It doesn't work that way. Sorry, I lost my place. Give me a second. The Buddha asked, do you doubt the Tathagata? So do you doubt what's being said? Manjusri answered, no, world-honored one. I perceive that the Tathagata has no definite nature, but he is neither born nor perishes. Therefore, I have no doubt whatsoever. This is what makes Manjusri Manjusri. Today, I was telling one of my students that's come a long way, and a long way very, very quickly, that continue to have the faith in the Buddha, faith in the Dharma, faith in the Sangha, faith in the teachings, and faith in yourself. Shelley. Sorry. So let me see. And that's important. So here, Manjusri is saying that he has no doubt at all, and that's important. Back again. No, I perceive that the Tathagata has no definite nature, that he's neither born nor perishes, therefore I have no doubt whatsoever. So the Buddha asked Manjusri, would you not say that the Tathagata now appears in the world? So does the Tathagata appear in this world? Okay. So you have to, this is your question. Does he appear or does he not appear in the world? Manjusri answered, if the Tathagata appears in the world, all the Dharma Dhatu should also appear. The Buddha asked Manjusri, would you say that the Buddhas as numerable as sands in the Ganges River have entered nirvana? So now he's saying that did all of these Buddhas enter nirvana? Manjusri answered, all Buddhas have one characteristic, inconceivability. So this one characteristic is that it's inconceivable. There is no way that we can do it. Can you hold on just 1 second? I apologize, but okay. So the Buddha asked, do you enter samadhi of the inconceivable? So we're always talking about whether we're going to enter into a samadhi. So some of you know samadhi, some of you have experienced samadhi, some have experienced really shallow samadhi, some have experienced very deep samadhi. Is it something that you enter? You were sitting there and you went, oh, I got into deep samadhi. Is that true? Let's see what Manjusri answers. No, world honored one. Because he said, do you enter the samadhi of the inconceivable? He says, I am the inconceivable. This is important when you're sitting on your cushion. You've been doing it. You sitting on the cushion trying to enter into a samadhi state. You're trying to get to some level, but it is not in this way. You have to when you're sitting on the cushion, you simply sit. Mind looking at mind. I'm sorry, I have to take this. Um, I'll be back in just a second. Am I back? Okay. I apologize for that. It couldn't be helped. I do not see any mind capable of conceiving anything. So when we sit to meditate, when we are walking around in a state of Chan, I shouldn't say a state of Chan, in Chan, we're not creating conceptual thinking. It is what the Dharmata Vibhaga Sutra said is a non-conceptual wakefulness. So when we sit to meditate, you should not manifest thoughts of self or thoughts of you sitting on a cushion. You just simply rest the mind in mind, and it will work. That's why if people trust what I say, it will work. You don't have to worry about getting into a samadhi state because you are the samadhi state. You are the inconceivable. Not you as an individual, but the very mind that's sitting in meditation is inconceivable. And you could say, well, I don't feel inconceivable. Of course, you're not going to feel because it's not a sensation. It's not something, it's not a state of mind. It is mind. So, this is very important as we begin to practice and begin to put, excuse me, this into our regular practice of sitting as well as whatever we're doing in our daily lives. So we continue. When I first brought forth bodhicitta, I did intend to enter that samadhi. So he's saying, when I first started, I intended to enter into the samadhi. However, as I reflect on it now, I see that I enter that samadhi really without thinking about it. That's why he entered the samadhi, because he didn't think about it. And so if you sit without thinking, without any conceptual thinking, and if you operate in your daily life in the same way, then you function very well. It doesn't mean that one does not have thoughts, but we don't cling to those thoughts. We don't give them an impression. We don't give them a value, up or down, good, bad, sacred, profane, whatever. We just let that go. We're just simply aware. We're aware that everything that's appearing is mine. Everything that's appearing is the Dharma Dhatu. How could it not be? Where else would it appear? Even if it's a dream, it has to have somewhere upon which it was projected upon, which is mine. Not bad. When the mind releases itself from this conceptual slumber, then it enters into um, uh, this non-conceptual wakefulness. Not bad. That's what you do when you're sitting on the cushion. And it works. Guarantee you it will work. Okay. Um, just as after a long practice, one becomes a skillful archer to be able to hit a target without thinking about it, so too, as a result of long practice, I am one with the samadhi of the inconceivable at all times, without thinking about it. Of course, that's how it works. Though I had to concentrate my mind on one object when I started to learn um, that samadhi. So it essentially it's saying, you can use a method to keep it, and that's what Shifu was saying. You concentrate the mind on one thing, and that's poison fighting poison. In terms of that, so he's saying it's not necessarily easy, but if you understand what he's saying, you simply can just sit. You have to develop the right concentration to do that. So the concentration is just holding the method very lightly. Whatever the method is, or if you're using silent illumination, just sit. Nothing more. You don't have to say, I am sitting. I've been sitting for this time period. I'm hungry. My legs hurt, or whatever. It doesn't matter. After a while, even if your legs hurt, mind is aware of it, but there's no suffering there. is just aware that's happening. Sariputra asked Manjusri, are there other superior, wonderful samadhi of ultimate quiescence? So he's going like, wow, this is good. Are there other, superior, wonderful samadhis of ultimate quiescence? If you were the Buddha or Manjusri, what would you say to him? I mean, like the ancient masters would say, what you want a second cup of slop? Because that's what he turned it into, is just a cup of slop. He's not penetrating it. He's not going to it and seeing what it is. He's just looking at it from the idea of greed. If this is great, then something else should be even better. There's got to be something. Manjusri answered, if there were a samadhi of inconceivable, then you might ask whether or not there are other samadhis of ultimate quiescence. However, according to my understanding, even the samadhi of the inconceivable is inapprehensible. So it's not something that you can grab or get and say, oh, I got to the samadhi of inconceivable. What is that? Try to explain that to somebody. Try to bring it forth. Try to demonstrate it to people in some way where they go, oh, I see. I can see the inconceivable. No, you can't. That's why they call it the inconceivable. What nonsense are you talking about, Sariputra? If things were real, you'd be able to see it. But since everything is fundamentally empty, it's not something that one can see. However, excuse me, how, next slide. Okay. Sariputra asked, is a samadhi of inconceivable inapprehensible? Manjusri said, a samadhi which is conceivable is apprehensible. So if you get into a samadhi and you just say, oh, this was so nice, it was very calm and whatever. I've had students that have reached levels where they're in a complete 100% state of bliss. And I was going, somebody was enjoying that bliss, right? So that really isn't inconceivable because there was somebody that was enjoying it. It's not a bad state to get into, but it can be very dangerous if you go. It's even beyond the forgot the name of it right now. The next level up before one goes through unified mind. And so he said, in fact, all sentient beings achieve the samadhi. All sentient beings have achieved the samadhi of inconceivable. Why? All minds are no minds. And to have no mind is called the samadhi of inconceivable. Therefore, the characteristics of all sentient beings and those of samadhi of inconceivable are identical and not different. So he's again killing any kind of an idea of a duality where Sariputra is going, wow, is there a place where you can get more than like one scoop of ice cream, maybe 3 scoops of ice cream on there? And he's saying all of that is already there. What are you reaching for? And again, this is the non-differentiation. So as one practices, and we don't have a discrimination of things, this non-differentiation of mind simply allows you to rest in the mind. the Buddha praised Manjusri, saying, "Excellent, excellent, because you have been planting good roots and cultivating pure conduct in the Buddha lands for a long time. You are able to discourse on the profound samadhi. Now you are abiding securely in the Paramita of Wisdom." So he's telling him, oh, this is the way, because you've done this. Now you, and he uses this term abiding, but it's not really in the same way, because Manjusri would say, I am the Paramita of Wisdom. And it is this that's really important, because if we can understand this in terms of how mind is inconceivable, then all of the rest of the paramitas will fall perfectly into place. They will be so incredibly profound and deep, way beyond what you ever thought something could be. It is in this way. Somebody's saying that they can't hear, but can you hear me? Okay. All right. So it must be on your side. Manjusri said, if I can give this discourse because I abide in the Paramita of Wisdom, then I have the concept of existence and abide in the concept of self. If I abide in the concept of existence and self, then the Paramita of Wisdom has an abode. So he's picking up on this. He's not letting him say that he abides in this wisdom. And he says, however, to think of the Paramita of Wisdom that abides in nothingness is also a concept of the self. And abiding in nothingness is also called having an abode. To steer clear of these two abodes, one should abide in non-abidance, as the Buddhists do. So this is really interesting, because what it is it's saying we let go of the idea of existence, we let go of the idea of non-existence, but we don't let go of the wisdom. And in the wisdom, the idea of existence and non-existence are compatible. They're not compatible in samsara, because you'd say, well, that's foolishness. You cannot say that this cell phone exists and it doesn't exist. Now it doesn't exist. Now it exists. But no, it's still hanging around, but it is just simply part of mind. And we see that. We don't lean one way or the other. This is the middle way. This is what Nagarjuna really picked up on, and you have to get used to this middle position, and become able to straddle the idea of the apparent reality and the absolute reality, neither falling into one or falling into the other, neither falling into eternalism or nihilistic as well. It's just this middle way where we see these things, we understand things are inconceivable. I shouldn't say it that way. That's the trap of words. There's not an understanding of it. It is just the thusness of inconceivability. Where are we at? Oh, thank you, Will. I think we'll stop there. That's quite a bit. That was pretty meaty in terms of what I was presenting to you. And again, I apologize for the interruption. But in any case, I think that gives you plenty to look at. And don't think you're going to get it on the first pass. it takes many passes and many readings and many sincere readings. You have to learn how to study, and that's what I'm teaching you. That's why instead of just reading this, I'm taking the time to break it down for you so that you can see all of the different aspects of these sutras, whether they're the philosophical viewpoints, the practice viewpoints, the combating of heterodox views, views that were there, and a lot of what is being said here is not challenges, is responses to the challenges from heterodox views about Buddhism, because remember, Buddhism's been around for a while, so we accept it. It's like Christianity, and you say, okay, that's a religion. But imagine when this is just coming out, and and people are positing these kinds um, of philosophical doctrine about what exists or how it exists, where it exists, or whatever, and it's taking a crack at you too, on your doctrines and your religion, and so they're going to want to fight back, but as they fight back, then you have somebody as a champion of Nagarjuna, which really knew how to fight back. The thing about Nagarjuna is if you begin to read his um, um, his treatises, a lot of times the philosophers will say that he took no viewpoint. That's wrong. He's taken a viewpoint. It's just that they don't understand it. No matter how much they've gone to school and studied, they just don't understand what he's doing because it's not in words and phrases. So anyway, we'll pick up next week. But thank you for listening. This was a bit of a mouthful. We'll take questions. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Hi, my question is about the existence and non-existence. Um, can this be related to something along the lines of the 8 or 9 jhanas in shamatha practice, in which I believe the ninth and final jhana is Nirodha Samapatti, total cessation. So this idea of existence and non-existence can be mapped to the ninth jhana.
And what do you contend is the ninth jhana?
Well, from reports by people who claim to attain it, this guy Delson Armstrong, he says it's just the awareness itself. Another way to put it is Ramana Maharshi would say that which is real, the only thing that is real, that is that which exists in deep dreamless sleep. I'm wondering if that has the same flavor that you're talking about.
Not really. I mean, these are things that people are positing on their side. I don't want to take the time to say yes or no or whatever with those. I think that belongs to them. In terms of their understanding, I think it's hard enough just to kind of understand the Prajna Paramita wisdom, and I think your efforts would be better served in really studying those and trying to penetrate them rather than worrying about what somebody else has achieved as some kind of an experience or an enlightenment. So I'd refer you back to what this root sutra that we're talking about today. Okay, it'll answer your
Okay.
questions. You'll know the
Okay.
difference. Okay, Harry.
Hi, Gilbert. It's
Hey.
quite a sutra. Yeah, you know how to pick them. So I was wondering, we're talking about the samadhi, the inconceivable samadhi, and so my question is about well, actually, I guess there's no question with the inconceivable samadhi. It's inconceivable, and then any attempt to encapsulate it in a concept is going to be, counterproductive. But there are other samadhis, like in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha first enters into the samadhi of innumerable meanings. And it talks about many different samadhis, even one samadhi where you can speak any language, right? So I'm just wondering, is there, it sounds seductive, these, that we're always being kind of enticed by these seeming powers, which have nothing to do with our happiness, really. But do you have any kind of suggestion of how you can approach these kind of, uh, a variety of samadhis and what perhaps how we, what we're supposed to get from the mention of these kind of things?
Hang on one second. This will probably be my last interruption, but hang tight and I'll be right back. Your question's a very good question, by the way. Okay, I'm back. All right. Now, would you repeat that? I'm kidding you, but just give me the like
The skinny?
the base part.
Yeah, it was just how we can approach when we read about these samadhis that the Buddha enters, and most of us are not quite there yet. I was just wondering what you thought was a useful teaching, a useful way of approaching these sort of things. It might simply be to ignore it, but I was wondering if there's some kind of middle way where there's some kind of heads up that we might get from
I
reading
think
about this.
I think that the best way is to practice with non-differentiation, and in this way, whether we're on the cushion or we're up, like today. Obviously, this was kind of a different day for me, but that's just the way it is. And so you look at the things and you still follow your function the best that you can. And when you sit and to meditate, you don't seek that, and that's why they were saying, Putra, wow, are there even better samadhis do you want? What more do you want? This is a samadhi of inconceivability. You know, there's all sorts of different ones where people talk about many different kinds of samadhis. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is that keeping the mind stable, and those whatever samadhis come up, they'll come up on their own naturally, and in due time. There's nothing that we can do on our side to prompt them to come. They come naturally. There's no, we fertilize the environment through the Dharma, but we don't, we have to then wait for the crops to grow. Shifu used to always say the story about the farmer that would always pick up his plants and raise them up another inch or so because he wanted them to grow faster, right? I'm sure you must have heard that 100 times, but in any case, it isn't in this way. There's another story of the person that said, what if I practice, 4 hours a day? How long would it take me? And so the master said, probably about 5 years. And then he said, well, what if I practice 8 hours a day? How long would it take me? And he goes, about 10 years. And it's in this way that everything is the middle way. But we don't search for things. We're not searching for anything on the cushion. We're not searching for experiences. Those experiences and the ideas of experiences, they get in the way. And so don't try to hang on to those things. They come on their own. If you really practice and still the mind, it works. I guarantee you it works. But you've got to sit there and let go of thought. You just have to rest the mind. You have to learn how to rest the mind. If you can learn how to rest the mind, then when you're off the cushion, the mind is resting as well. And that's when it all starts coming together. And then when you start to read the sutras, your mind is resting in the sutras. Wow. That's why it begins to make sense. It'll all come together. And it comes together in a way that is inconceivable. But it will. It will
That's
do
great.
that. Okay.
Gilbert, I don't know if you let me. There's a koan from the Jack Kornfield book that's very apropos to what we're talking about. It's about a half page. I don't know if you want to move on or let me read it. Up to you.
I'll say save it for the next time,
Okay,
and
sure.
I'll be glad to hear. Is it
Sure,
Jack
sure.
Kornfield or Blowfield?
No, well, he's just quoting. He's quoting a koan. It's kind of humorous, dealing with this issue of striving and what kind of
Yeah.
happens. Yeah, but sure, another time, sure.
Okay, Sam.
Amitofo, Gilbert, and thank you for lecturing on this again. And I hope everything's okay on your end. And we appreciate you staying focused despite whatever's going on for you. And thank you for keeping the time for us. But something I just wanted to raise was this specific lecture today in the talk of samadhi reminded me of in April, I was very fortunate to attend Guowang's retreat, Guowang Fashi, excuse me. And she was lecturing on the treatise of the Mahayana faith, treatise of the awakening to the Mahayana faith. And it's
the
funny,
Mahayana, not the Mahayana faith. It's the awakening of the faith in the Mahayana. And the Mahayana is not Mahayana faith. It's Mahayana. At that time, there was no Mahayana. It is the Buddha. Mm-hmm. So you should read it saying, awakening the faith of the Buddha.
Awakening the faith of the Buddha. Thank you, Gilbert.
Okay, go ahead.
In the part that a lot of your lecture had me going back to is there's two statements where the first statement is essentially when cultivating this meditation, one removes and I shouldn't say one, but mind removes all concepts in the thorough moment that they arise. indeed, one rejects the concept of removing concepts. And this is bringing me back to the I am the unobstructed, and how mind is already unobstructed. And it goes further to say that the view will be let go in conceiving that the mind can remove the mind in that sense. So it's this idea, like you were saying about with when there's this great bliss that comes from the samadhi, and who is enjoying this bliss. It seems as though we spend a lot of time on the cushion thinking like there's this removing of concepts, but who is removing these concepts, and how could mind seek to remove mind? This is creating two where there isn't, and things like this. I may be making a false correlation here, but a lot of the lecture today reminded me of those specific phrases.
Well, I think that if you study the sutra, all of what you were saying, they will all be connected, okay? And you'll see they'll click together as you begin to do that. The awakening of the faith in Mahayana is something that was a very early text that came in terms of this. The Prajna Paramita Wisdom Sutras are compilations of many different sutras and kind of a work in progress going all the way, but they're still all consistent in terms of the understanding, in terms of where they're going. I think that as you begin to practice, you will see more and more similarities to this, to the extent that when you read something as deep as this, or something such as Nagarjuna's commentaries on the perfection of the six paramitas, that's big league stuff, and everything. If you can penetrate that, everything else will make sense. At some point, it comes to a point where the sutras begin to make sense, just simply because you're no longer looking at them from an idea of a conceptual viewpoint, but just allowing them to be the thusness that they are. Okay, so keep going. You're working hard. Okay, Chloe. You're muted right now. Will's working on it. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Gilbert. I have a question regarding there's a paragraph on page 107 where Manjusri says, why all minds are non-minds, and to have no mind is called the samadhi of the inconceivable. Therefore, the characteristic of all sentient beings and those of the samadhi of the inconceivable are identical and not different. And I, have been thinking about what you said earlier, that, regarding the neither existent nor non-existent nature of the Paramita of Wisdom. And then you also said that, what is the function of the mind? Compassion. I wonder if this is what this whole thing is about, that there's no differentiation between all sentient beings and the samadhi of the inconceivable. And that is like, does compassion mean that for you? Like that because there's no difference between, a Buddha and sentient beings in nature, that we should have this compassion. Like, I don't know if my question makes sense.
Your question makes sense to me. And it's something that as one practices, they penetrate the wisdom deeper and deeper, where you have this Mahaprajna wisdom, and which leads to the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutras. So these are the highest level of the practice of wisdom of the paramitas. And that's why I've been spending so much time presenting the paramita of wisdom to you, because it's the doorway or the entryway into the others. As we begin to practice in this way, then we understand that all of this leads us to the doorway of Anyatara Samyak Sambodhi. And so this highest perfected wisdom, when we're talking about that, we're talking about the inconceivable. And so this is something where we no longer the teachings can take us any further. We've developed a platform upon which to go with. But if you have faith and faith in yourself, then it will work. And you have to straddle this ground where sometimes it appears that you're walking on marbles and slipping around, and that's okay, because what's happening is that there's a deconstruction of the ego. And little by little, as you begin to practice this, it's a reverse engineering of the 12 nidanas, where you start with death and you work your way backwards all the way through to the first one, which is ignorance. And the wisdom is what conquers the ignorance. It breaks the ignorance, and the fundamental ignorance, as evidenced by the Queen Srimala Devi's Linesworth Sutra, is this Niscent entrenchment of this ignorance of the self. And so when we understand that, we let go of the self. Mind's still there. We have to trust. We have to trust that mind will still be there. Leaping into the void doesn't mean that you hit a hard surface when you're there. It just means that there is an absorption of the self into mind. This is inconceivable and not probable, because the self is already within mind, but the idea of clinging to a life and being is no longer there. That's why they call it the great death, because there's no longer that holding on to the idea that there is an individual self. If you hold on to that idea, you die. That's why I often talk about this as being, this is a matter of life and death. It is one that, if we understand that, we encounter the great death, but that's not death as we see it. It's the death of the constant cycle of samsara, without the rusing, the knowing of what you're doing here. And when you don't know what you're doing here, then it's just simply suffering. Of course, there is an interest in wanting to take care of that. It gives the mind a headache. So the mind has an interest in getting rid of that headache, right? So it works in this way. But remember, the headache, just as we talked about from the Vilamakritti Sutra, that the illness of Vilamakritti is all sentient beings. And so all sentient beings, if they're sick, then he is sick, because there's no duality to it. So this is where this interest and compassion comes from, but it's an unbridled compassion, not one that's sentimental. And so you have to see it in the right way. I recently had a friend of mine she's kind of borderline practitioner, but I see that she has some merits. But she told me that she ran over a baby squirrel the other day. And so she was all sad about that. And she said even the little baby squirrel had a nut in its mouth. So how sad can you be, about the baby squirrel that you ran over, that in the joy that carrying the nut, and then you run him over and you kill him? Well, what about if it was a rat with an insect in its mouth? would you build a little, and she literally built a little grave with flowers and stuff. I always talk about the baby dead raccoon, but this was a little baby dead squirrel. It's a different kind of compassion. It's not the compassion of seeing somebody that's a horrible person and transferring merit to them to try to get them to awaken. But this is what we do. It's an undiscriminatory, undifferentiated compassion that functions naturally. This is a difference. You're right on the right path with what you're doing. You have to look at this and start seeing, what is this compassion? And as you see it, then it will help you a lot. You know, you just kind of look at that and say, what is this compassion? It's not this I normally call it little baby dead raccoon, but here it's little baby dead squirrel compassion. You know, it's for everything, you know, that life is taken away. And so you see things in this way. It's undifferentiated. Of course, you're going to want to help. No, it just it is something that you have to find the way to transfer more and more merit. Find the way to do that, because as you begin to practice, you start seeing how many sentient beings there are from all the realms, from the heaven realm all the way down to the hell realm. And so all those sentient beings are in our charge and our care, because they don't understand that they're caught up in this horrible dream. So anyway, practice in that way, and it will help you. Robert, do you have more to say, or is that it?
Oh yeah, sorry, I just have one quick question. So the second question I have is that, you know, we've been talking about the samadhi of inconceivable, and I just want to know if it's inconceivable in and of itself, or is Manjusri here saying that, you know, it's inconceivable for us if we rely on our five senses?
Your mind is very clever. It wants to slip back in and kind of give you something back there. It's all inconceivable. There is no self. It's not self. You know, it has nothing to do with self. Inconceivable is just the Dharmakaya. And when the mind is unobstructed, then we see everything appearing in the Dharmakaya, but there is no life and being, no one that comes to a realization. The realization is that there's no one that comes to a realization, but all sentient beings have Buddha nature. And that's where you should kind of like contemplate that. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
You're welcome. Robert.
Hello, Gilbert. How are you? I have a question. In the beginning of today's lecture, you mentioned the word, maybe it's the first time I heard it.
Your sound is a little bit off.
No, there are no knower. There are no knower. When I hear this, and I'm still puzzled. The last few years, when we sit or when I sit, it's like in the knowing state of the mind, the non-arising mind, knowing the arising mind. And right now it's like even throw away the knowing mind. It's like you're knowing when you're sitting, but there is nobody knowing. I think I'm kind of stuck in this sitting mind work. When I sit, it's like doing mind work, but today I hear this concept of no knower. It seems to make it. I can't say it seems to make sense because it's not language. It's unexplainable understanding, because it's almost like it's non-understandable. Non-conceptually, you just conceptually cannot understand the no knowing. I mean, no knower. But it's true. There is no knower. You just know, but there's no knower. It's just so it's beautiful, but it's really funny, and it's really I don't know whether this is called void or what. It's like, yeah, it's there, but it's not there. It's really, really strange.
I don't know.
Wonder, can you expand on this?
I just did. I don't know. Anyone else? Robert, where you're at is where you should be at. You're on that floor with marbles all over it, and you can't get a grip. So you might as well just push yourself off. And in due time it will come. For me to give you a second cup of slop will not be helpful to you either. You just stay what you're doing and challenge that and look at that and see that, because you're there at what Han Shan and what Master Shu Yun said, you're at the door of Chan. These are the essentials for beginners to the practice Chan. And you go, but wait, I've been studying for a long time. You're a beginner. And you're there, and you're right there at the door. And so these Chan masters, they put a high bar up. They weren't just about let anybody get in. It is something that you have to just keep at that. It's just keep working it and demand an answer. It will turn into a huatou on its own. So just keep doing that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
But if next time, just ask the lamppost.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Gilbert.
Okay. Anybody else? Going. All right. Where's Penny? I saw Penny. You got my message. You can unmute. Okay. Well, you can stop the recording, and then I can just visit with everybody. You can just open everybody's lines.